Dracula by Bram Stoker. Jonathan Harker's journal, 5th of May, Bistritz, Transylvania. This is the post town named by the Count in his helpful notes for my journey from London. I shall enter here some of my experiences so that I can refresh my memory when I talk over my travels with dear Mina on my return to England. It was on the dark side of twilight when I arrived at Bistritz. Count Dracula had directed me to go to the Golden Krone Hotel. There, the landlord said, "The Herr Englishman?" "Yes," I said, "Jonathan Harker." He gave me this letter. "My friend, welcome. I am anxiously expecting you. Sleep well tonight. Tomorrow at the Borgo Pass, my carriage will await you, and will bring you to me. Your friend, Dracula." When I asked the landlord if he knew anything of Count Dracula, both he and his wife crossed themselves. And the old lady said, "Must you go? Oh, young Herr, do you know where you are going and what you are going to?" And taking a crucifix from her neck, offered it to me. When I got on the coach, the driver was talking with the landlady, and every now and then they looked at me. I could hear a lot of words, often repeated. Amongst them were Ordog, Satan, Pokol, hell, and Vorvolaka, either werewolf or vampire. I must ask the Count about these superstitions. When we started, all made the sign of the cross and pointed 2 fingers towards me. A fellow passenger explained that it was a charm against the evil eye. We travelled at a good speed. When it grew dark, the passengers kept urging the driver to further speed. As we entered the Borgo Pass, one by one, the passengers made the sign of the cross and the guard against the evil eye. Then the horses began to neigh and snort wildly, so the driver had to hold them up. A carriage drew up beside the coach, driven by a tall man with a long beard and a great black hat. I could only see the gleam of a pair of very bright eyes, which seemed red in the lamplight. He said to our driver, "Give me the Herr's luggage." I descended and got into the carriage. Without a word, the strange driver shook his reins, the horses turned, and we swept into the darkness of the pass. As I looked back, I saw my late companions crossing themselves. The carriage went at a hard pace straight along. Then a wild howling began, that of wolves, which sounded nearer and nearer, as though they were closing round on us from every side. Suddenly the driver pulled up the horses in the courtyard of a vast ruined castle. The driver jumped down and held out his hand to assist me to alight. Then he jumped again to his seat, and the carriage disappeared. I stood in silence where I was, for I did not know what to do. What sort of grim adventure was it on which I had embarked? Was this a customary incident in the life of a solicitor's clerk, sent out to explain the purchase of a London estate to a foreigner? I heard a heavy step approaching behind the great door, then a rattling of chains and the clanking of massive bolts, and the great door swung back. Within stood a tall, old man, clean-shaven, save for a long white moustache, and clad in black from head to foot. "Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own will." He moved forward, and holding out his hand, grasped mine. It seemed as cold as ice, more like the hand of a dead man than a living man. I said, "Count Dracula?" He bowed as he replied, "I am Dracula." He insisted on carrying my traps up a great winding stair and along a great passage. At the end of this I rejoiced to see a well-lit room in which a table was spread for supper. The Count crossed the room and opened another door. It was a great bedroom, well lighted and warmed. "I pray you be seated and sup how you please," said the Count. "Excuse me that I do not join you, but I have dined already." During the time I was eating, the Count asked me many questions as to my journey, and I told him all I had experienced. His face was strong and aquiline, with a high-bridged thin nose and peculiarly arched nostrils. The mouth was fixed and cruel-looking, with particularly sharp white teeth. These protruded over the lips, whose remarkable ruddiness showed astonishing vitality in a man of his years. I could not but notice that there were hairs in the centre of the palm. The nails were long and fine, and cut to a sharp point. We seemed to talk for hours, and as I looked towards the window, I saw the first dim streak of the coming dawn. The Count's eyes gleamed, and he said, "But you must be tired. Tomorrow you shall sleep as late as you wish. I have to be away till the afternoon." 7th of May. It is again early morning. Yesterday I slept till late in the day. When I had dressed myself, I found a card on the table on which was written, "I have to be absent for a while. Do not wait for me. Dracula." I notice that in none of the rooms is there a mirror. I had to get the little shaving glass from my bag before I could either shave or brush my hair. I looked about for something to read, for I did not like to go about the castle until I had asked the Count's permission. I opened another door in the room and found a sort of library with a vast number of English books, magazines, and newspapers. Whilst I was looking at the books, the door opened, and the Count entered. He said, "I am glad you found your way in here, for I am sure there is much that will interest you. You come to me as agent of my friend Peter Hawkins, my solicitor, to tell me all about my new estate in London. You shall rest here with me a while. You may go anywhere you wish in the castle, except where the doors are locked. We are in Transylvania, and Transylvania is not England. Our ways are not your ways. And there shall be to you many strange things. Come, tell me of London, and of the house which you have procured for me." We went thoroughly into the business of the purchase of the estate at Purfleet, and got his signature to the necessary papers. I read him the notes which I had made at the time about the house. At Purfleet, on a by-road of ancient structure, built of heavy stones, and has not been repaired for a large number of years, the estate is called Carfax. There are but few houses close at hand, one being a very large house, only recently formed into a private lunatic asylum. It is not, however, visible from the grounds. Presently, with an excuse, the Count left me. I began to look at some of the books around me. One was an atlas, which I found opened, naturally, at England. On looking at it, I found certain places marked. One was near London, where his new estate was situated. Another was at Whitby. After supper, having again eaten nothing, the Count stayed with me, chatting and asking questions on every conceivable subject, hour after hour. All at once, we heard the crow of a cock. Count Dracula, jumping to his feet, said, "Why, there's the morning again. How remiss I am to let you stay up so long." And with a courtly bow, he left me. 8th of May. It may be that this strange night existence is telling on me, but would that were all. I only slept a few hours and got up and was just beginning to shave. Suddenly I felt a hand on my shoulder and heard the Count's voice saying to me, "Good morning." I started, for it amazed me that I had not seen him, since the reflection of my mirror covered the whole room behind me. In starting, I had cut myself slightly, but did not notice it at the moment. I turned to my shaving glass again to see how I had been mistaken. This time there could be no error. There was no reflection of him in the mirror. At that instant, I saw that the cut had bled a little, and the blood was trickling over my chin. When the Count saw my face, his eyes blazed with fury, and he suddenly made a grab at my throat, but his hand touched the string of beads which held the crucifix, and it made an instant change in him. The fury passed so quickly that I could hardly believe that it was ever there. "Take care," he said. "Take care how you cut yourself. It is more dangerous than you think in this country." And opening the window with one wrench of his terrible hand, he flung out the mirror. I breakfasted alone. It is strange that as yet I have not seen the Count eat or drink. After breakfast I did a little exploring. Doors, doors, doors everywhere, and all locked and bolted. In no place, save from the windows in the castle walls, is there an available exit. The castle is a veritable prison, and I am a prisoner. I had hardly come to this conclusion when I heard the great door below shut, and knew that the Count had returned. I went cautiously to my own room, and found him making the bed. This only confirmed what I had all along thought, that there were no servants in the house. 12th of May. Last evening, when the Count came from his room, he began by asking me, "Have you written since your first letter to our friend Mr. Peter Hawkins, or to any other?" It was with some bitterness in my heart that I answered that I had not, that as yet I had not seen any opportunity of sending letters to anybody. "Then write now, my young friend, and say, if it will please you, that you shall stay with me until a month from now." Then he added, "Let me warn you with all seriousness that should you leave these rooms, you will not by any chance go to sleep in any other part of the castle. Be warned." When he left me, I went up the stone stair to where I could look out over the abyss on the south side of the castle. I gazed over the beautiful expanse, bathed in a soft yellow moonlight. It was almost as light as day. As I leaned from the window, my eye was caught by something moving, a story below me, where the windows of the Count's own room would look out. What I saw was the Count's head coming out from the window. My feelings changed to repulsion and terror when I saw the whole man slowly emerge from the window and begin to crawl down the castle wall over that dreadful abyss, face down, with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings. 15th of May. Once more have I seen the Count go out in his lizard fashion. I went to make a thorough examination of the various stairs and passages, and to try the doors that opened from them. At last I found one unlocked door at the top of a stairway. I was now in a wing of the castle further to the right than the rooms I knew, and a story lower down. My lamp seemed to be of little effect in the brilliant moonlight, but I was glad to have it with me, for there was a dread loneliness in the place which chilled my heart and made my nerves tremble. Here I am writing in my diary all that has happened since I closed it last. Later, the morning of 16th May. God preserve my sanity. It is maddening to think that of all foul things that lurk in this hateful place, the Count is the least dreadful to me, that to him alone I can look for safety. When I had written in my diary, I felt sleepy. The Count's warning came into my mind, but I took a pleasure in disobeying it. I suppose I must have fallen asleep. I hope so. But I fear, for all that followed was startlingly real. I was not alone. In the moonlight opposite me were 3 young women. Though the moonlight was behind them, they threw no shadow on the floor. They came close to me and looked at me and whispered together. All 3 had brilliant white teeth that shone like pearls against the ruby of their voluptuous lips. I felt a burning desire that they would kiss me. One girl went on her knees and bent over me. Lower and lower went her head, as the lips went below the range of my mouth and chin, and seemed about to fasten on my throat. But at that instant I was conscious of the presence of the Count, and of his being in a storm of fury. I saw his strong hand grasp the slender neck of the woman, and with giant's power draw it back. He exclaimed, "How dare you touch him, any of you? How dare you cast an eye on him when I had forbidden it? When I am done with him, you shall kiss him at your will. Now go!" "Are we to have nothing tonight?" said one of them, as she pointed to a bag which he had thrown upon the floor, and which moved, as though there were some living thing within it. For answer, he nodded his head. One of the women jumped forward and opened it. There was a gasp and a low wail, as of a half-smothered child. As I looked, the women disappeared, and with them the dreadful bag. I awoke in my own bed. If it be that I had not dreamt, the Count himself must have carried me here. 19th of May. Last night the Count asked me in the suavest tones to write 3 letters, one saying that my work here was nearly done, and that I should start for home within a few days, another that I was starting on the next morning, and the third that I had left the castle and arrived at Bistritz. He calculated a minute, and then said, "The first should be June 12th, the second June 19th, and the third June 29th. I now know the span of my life. God help me. He knows that I know too much, and that I must not live, lest I be dangerous to him. My only chance is to prolong my opportunities. 17th June. This morning I heard without a cracking of whips and pounding and scraping of horses' feet on the courtyard, and I saw drive into the yard 2 great wagons, each drawn by 8 sturdy horses, and at the head of each pair a Zigany. I ran to the door, intending to descend and try to join them through the main hall. Again a shock. My door was fastened on the outside. Then I ran to the window and cried to them. They resolutely turned away. The wagons contained great square boxes, evidently empty by the ease with which the Zigany handled them. I counted 50 boxes in all. The Zigany are quartered somewhere in the castle, and are doing work of some kind, for now and then I hear, far away, muffled sound, as of mattock and spade. 25th of June, morning. It has always been at night time that I have been in danger. I have not yet seen the Count in the daylight. Can it be that he sleeps only when others wake? If I could only get into his room. There is a way, if one dares to take it. I have seen him myself crawl from his window. Why should not I imitate him and go in by his window? Same day, later, I have made the effort and, God helping me, have come safely back to this room. I must put down every detail in order. I did not feel dizzy. I suppose I was too excited, and the time seemed ridiculously short, till I found myself standing on the windowsill. I bent down and slid, feet foremost, in through the window. At one corner of the room was a heavy door. It was open, and led through a stone passage to a circular stairway which went steeply down. I descended. At the bottom there was a dark tunnel-like passage, through which came a deathly, sickly odor. As I went through the passage, the smell grew closer and heavier. At last, I pulled open a heavy door and found myself in a ruined chapel. The ground had recently been dug over, and the earth placed in great wooden boxes. There, in one of the great boxes, on a pile of newly dug earth, lay the Count, but looking as if his youth had been half renewed, for the white hair and moustache were changed to dark iron grey, the cheeks were fuller, and the mouth redder than ever, for on the lips were gouts of fresh blood, which trickled from the corners of the mouth and ran over the chin and neck. It seemed as if the whole awful creature were simply gorged with blood. He lay like a filthy leech, exhausted with his repletion. This was the being I was helping to transfer to London, where, perhaps for centuries to come, he might amongst its teeming millions satiate his lust for blood. A terrible desire came upon me to rid the world of such a monster. There was no lethal weapon at hand, but I seized a shovel and, lifting it high, struck with the edge downward at the hateful face. But as I did so, the head turned, and the eyes fell full upon me. The sight seemed to paralyze me, and the shovel turned in my hand and glanced from the face, merely making a deep gash above the forehead. The last glimpse I had was of the bloated face, blood-stained, and fixed with a grin of malice which would have held its own in the nethermost hell. I am alone in the castle with the Count, but I shall not remain. I shall try to scale the castle wall farther than I have yet attempted. I may find a way from this dreadful place, and then away for home, and my dear Mina, away from this cursed land where the devil and his children still walk with earthly feet. Letter. Lucy Westenra to Mina Murray. 24th of May, Hillingham. My dearest Mina, Mamma and I met some time ago a young man that would just do for you if you were not already engaged to Jonathan. He is handsome, well off, and of good birth. He is a doctor and really clever. He is only 29, and he has an immense lunatic asylum, all under his own care at Purfleet. He called here to see us, and often comes now. I think he is one of the most resolute men I ever saw, and yet the most calm. His name is John Seward, and I must confess that he has proposed to me. I did not accept, of course. I do not love him, but what a dear man he is. He said he hoped I would be happy, and that if I ever wanted a friend, I must count him one of my best. My dear, I must stop here. It will be so good to see you again at Whitby. Lucy. Mina Murray's journal, 24th of July, Whitby. Lucy met me at the station looking sweeter and lovelier than ever, and we drove up to the house at the Crescent. I wonder where Jonathan is, and if he's thinking of me. I wish he were here. 26th July. I am anxious, and it soothes me to express myself here. It is like whispering to oneself and listening at the same time. I am unhappy about Lucy and about Jonathan. I had not heard from Jonathan for some time and was very concerned, but yesterday dear Mr. Hawkins, who is always so kind, sent me a letter from him. It is only a line dated from Castle Dracula, and says that he is just starting for home. That is not like Jonathan. Then, too, Lucy, although she is so well, has lately taken to her old habit of walking in her sleep. Her mother has spoken to me about it, and we have decided that I am to lock the door of our room every night. 6th of August. No news from Jonathan. I am getting quite uneasy about him. I do wish he would write, if it were only a single line. Lucy walks more than ever, and each night I am awakened by her moving about the room. There is an odd concentration about her which I do not understand. Even in her sleep she seems to be watching me. Last night was very threatening, and the fishermen say that we are in for a storm. I sat on the cliff top today taking the air, and the Coast Guard came along with his spyglass under his arm. He stopped to talk with me, as he always does, but all the time kept looking at a strange ship out at sea. I can't make her out, he said. She's a Russian by the look of her, but she's knocking about in the queerest way. She is steered mighty strangely, for she doesn't mind the hand on the wheel, changes about with every puff of the wind. We'll hear more of her before this time tomorrow. Cutting from the Whitby Evening Post, 8th of August, pasted in Mina Murray's journal. One of the greatest and suddenest storms on record has just been experienced here, with results both strange and unique. A little after midnight came a strange sound from over the sea, and high overhead the air began to carry a strange, faint, hollow booming. Then, without warning, the tempest broke. The waves rose in growing fury, till every few minutes the sea was like a roaring and devouring monster. Before long, a searchlight discovered some distance away a schooner with all sails set, apparently the same vessel which had been noticed earlier in the evening. Then came another rush of dank mist which seemed to close on all things like a grey pall. The roar of the tempest and the crash of the thunder and the booming of the mighty billows came through the damp oblivion even louder than before. The rays of the searchlight were kept fixed on the harbour mouth, and then between the piers, leaping from wave to wave as it rushed at headlong speed, swept the strange schooner, with all sails set, and gained the safety of the harbour. The searchlight followed her, and a shudder ran through all who saw her. For lashed to the helm was a corpse, with drooping head which swung horribly to and fro at each motion of the ship. No other form could be seen on deck at all. A great awe came on all as they realized that the ship, as if by a miracle, had found the harbour unsteered save by the hand of a dead man. But strangest of all, the very instant the shore was touched, an immense dog sprang up on deck from below and jumped onto the sand. Making straight for the steep cliff where the churchyard hangs over the laneway, it disappeared in the darkness. The poor wretch at the wheel was simply fastened by his hands tied one over the other. Between the inner hand and the wood was a crucifix. The Coast Guard said the man must have tied up his own hands, fastening the knots with his teeth. It turns out that the schooner is a Russian, from Varna, and is called the Demeter, with only a small amount of cargo, a number of great wooden boxes filled with mould. This cargo was consigned to a Whitby solicitor, who this morning went aboard and formally took possession of the goods consigned to him. A good deal of interest was abroad concerning the dog, which landed when the ship struck. To the general disappointment, however, it seems to have disappeared entirely from the town. Early this morning, a large dog, a half-bred mastiff, was found dead in the roadway opposite its master's yard. It had been fighting, and manifestly had had a savage opponent, for its throat was torn away and its belly was slit open, as if with a savage claw. Mina Murray's journal, 10th of August. The funeral of the poor sea captain today was most touching. Every boat in the harbour seemed to be there, and the coffin was carried by captains, all the way up to the churchyard. Lucy came with me, and we went early to our old seat. The poor fellow was laid to rest quite near our seat, so that we stood on it when the time came and saw everything. Poor Lucy seemed much upset. She was restless and uneasy all the time, and I cannot but think that her dreaming at night is telling on her. She will be dreaming of this tonight, I am sure. 11th of August, 3 a.m. Diary again. I am too agitated to sleep. Suddenly I became broad awake and sat up with a horrible sense of fear upon me, and of some feeling of emptiness around me. Lucy's bed was empty. The door was shut, but not locked as I had left it. I feared to wake her mother, who has been more than usually ill lately, so threw on some clothes and got ready to look for her. I came to the hall door and found it open. I took a big, heavy shawl and ran out. The clock was striking 1 as I ran, but I could see no sign of the white figure which I expected. At the edge of the west cliff above the pier, I looked across the harbour to the east cliff, in the hope of seeing Lucy in our favourite seat. There was a bright full moon with heavy black driving clouds. As the cloud passed the church and the churchyard became gradually visible, there, on our favourite seat, the silver light of the moon struck a half-reclining figure, snowy white. There was something long and black bending over the half-reclining figure. I called in fright, "Lucy, Lucy!" And something raised a head, and from where I was I could see a white face and red, gleaming eyes. Lucy did not answer, and I ran on to the entrance of the churchyard. I could see Lucy half-reclining with her head lying over the back of the seat. She was quite alone, and there was not a sign of any living thing about. As I came close, she put up her hand in her sleep and pulled the collar of her nightdress close round her throat. I fastened the shawl at her throat with a big safety pin, but I must have been clumsy and pricked her with it, for by and by she put her hand to her throat again and moaned. We got home without meeting a soul. Before falling asleep, she implored me not to say a word to anyone, even her mother, about her sleepwalking adventure. Same day, noon, all goes well. Lucy looks better this morning than she has done for weeks. I was sorry to notice that my clumsiness with the safety pin hurt her. There are 2 little red points like pinpricks, and on the band of her nightdress was a drop of blood. 13th of August. Again I woke in the night and found Lucy sitting up in bed, still asleep, pointing to the window. I got up quietly and looked out. Between me and the moonlight flitted a great bat, coming and going in great whirling circles. When I came back from the window, Lucy had lain down again and was sleeping peacefully. She did not stir again all night. 14th of August. Lucy had a headache and went to bed early. I saw her asleep and went out for a little stroll myself. When coming home, I threw a glance up at our window and saw Lucy with her head lying up against the side of the windowsill and her eyes shut. She was fast asleep, and by her, seated on the windowsill, was something that looked like a good-sized bird. I ran upstairs, but as I came into the room, she was moving back to her bed, fast asleep. 17th of August. Some sort of shadowy pall seems to be coming over our happiness. No news from Jonathan, and Lucy seems to be growing weaker. She gets up in the night and sits at the open window. I trust her feeling ill may not be from that unlucky prick of the safety pin. I looked at her throat just now as she lay asleep, and the tiny wounds seem not to have healed. They're still open, and if anything, larger than before, and the edges of them are faintly white. 19th of August. At last, news of Jonathan. He is in Budapest, in hospital. The dear fellow has been ill. That is why he did not write. I am to leave in the morning and go over to him and bring him home. We shall be married out there and return as husband and wife. Letter, Mina Harker, to Lucy Westenra. Budapest, 24th of August. My dearest Lucy, I know you will be anxious to hear all that has happened since we parted at the railway station at Whitby. I found my dear one, oh, so thin and pale and weak-looking. He does not remember anything that has happened to him for a long time past. At least, he wants me to believe so, and I shall never ask. He has had some terrible shock, and I fear it might tax his poor brain if he were to try to recall it. Later, Jonathan asked the nurse to get a notebook from his jacket. He said to me, "You know, dear, I have had a great shock. The secret is here, and I do not want to know it. Take it and keep it, read it if you will, but never let me know. Unless, indeed, some solemn duty should come upon me to go back to the bitter hours. Asleep or awake, sane or mad, recorded here." I shall post this letter now and write you very soon again. I must stop, for Jonathan is waking. I must attend to my husband. Your ever-loving Mina Harker. Lucy Westenra's diary. Hillingham, 24th of August. I must imitate Mina and keep writing things down. Then we can have long talks when we do meet. I wonder when it will be. Last night I seemed to be dreaming again, just as I was at Whitby. Perhaps it is the change of air, or getting home again. It is all dark and horrid to me, for I can remember nothing. But I am full of vague fear, and I feel so weak and worn out. 25th of August. More bad dreams. I wish I could remember them. This morning I am horribly weak. My face is ghastly pale, and my throat pains me. Dr. Seward's diary, the 2nd of September. This morning I paid a visit to the Westenra home at Hillingham. I was saddened to see my dear Lucy in such a poor state of health. In my opinion, there is not any functional disturbance or any malady that I know of. At the same time, she is woefully different from what she was when I saw her last. I could easily see that she is somewhat bloodless, but I could not see the usual anemic signs. I have written to my old friend and master, Professor Van Helsing of Amsterdam, who knows much about obscure diseases. I have asked him to come over. 3rd of September. Van Helsing has come and gone. He said, "I have made careful examination, but there is no functional cause. With you I agree that there has been much blood lost. You must send to me the telegram every day, and if there is cause, I shall come again." Telegram, Seward to Van Helsing. 6th of September. Terrible change for the worse. Come at once. Do not lose an hour. Dr. Seward's diary. 7th September. Van Helsing and I were shown up to Lucy's room. If I was shocked when I saw her yesterday, I was horrified when I saw her today. She was ghastly, chalkily pale. The red seemed to have gone even from her lips and gums, and the bones of her face stood out prominently. Her breathing was painful to see or hear. Van Helsing's face grew set as marble, and his eyebrows converged till they almost touched over his nose. He adjusted the pillow to the patient's head. As he did so, the narrow black velvet band, which she always seemed to wear round her throat, was dragged a little up and showed a red mark on her throat. I could hear the deep hiss of indrawn breath, which is one of Van Helsing's ways of betraying emotion. Just over the external jugular vein, there were 2 punctures, not large, but the edges were white and worn-looking. It at once occurred to me that this wound, or whatever it was, might be the means of that manifest loss of blood, but I abandoned the idea as soon as formed. The whole bed would have been drenched to a scarlet. The professor stood up. "I must go back to Amsterdam tonight," he said. "There are books and things there which I want. You must remain here all the night, and you must not sleep. Later on, we can sleep, you and I. I shall be back as soon as possible, and then we may begin." 8th of September. I sat up all night with Lucy. After a long spell, she seemed to be sinking off to sleep, but with an effort seemed to pull herself together and shook it off. "You do not want to go to sleep?" I asked. "No, I'm afraid. But, my dear girl, you may sleep tonight. I am here, watching you, and I can promise that nothing will happen." She gave a deep sigh of relief and sank back, asleep. 9th of September. For 2 nights I had hardly a wink of sleep, and my brain was beginning to feel that numbness which marks cerebral exhaustion. Lucy was much better today. She said, "No sitting up tonight for you. You were worn out. I am quite well again." So on her promise to call me if she should want anything, I lay on the sofa and forgot all about everything. 10th of September. I was conscious of the professor's hand on my head and started to awake all in a second. "And how is our patient?" "Well, when I left her," I answered. "Come, let us see," he said, and together we went into the room. Van Helsing stepped with his soft, cat-like tread over to the bed. As I raised the blind and the morning sunlight flooded the room, I heard the Professor's low hiss of inspiration, and a deadly fear shot through my heart. There, on the bed, seemingly in a swoon, lay poor Lucy, more horribly white and wan-looking than ever. Even the lips were white, and the gums seemed to have shrunken back from the teeth. Van Helsing said, "Bring the brandy." I flew to the dining room and returned with the decanter. He wetted the poor white lips with it. He felt her heart and said, "It is not too late. I stay here tonight, and I shall sit with little miss myself. You and I must watch the case, and we must have none other to know." 11th of September, Van Helsing in excellent spirits, and Lucy much better. A big parcel from abroad came for the Professor. He opened it and showed a great bundle of white flowers. "These are for you, Miss Lucy," he said. "Oh, Professor, I believe you are only putting up a joke on me. Why, these flowers are only common garlic," Lucy cried. To my surprise, Van Helsing rose up and said with all his sternness, "No trifling with me. I never jest. There is grim purpose in all I do, and I warn you that you do not thwart me. See, I will place them myself in your room. I make myself the wreath that you are to wear." We went into Lucy's room, taking the flowers with us. The Professor fastened up the window securely. Next, taking a handful of the flowers, he rubbed them all over the sashes, the jamb of the door, above, below, and at each side, and round the fireplace in the same way. I said, "Well, Professor, this certainly puzzles me. It is, well, we have no skeptic here, or he would say that you were working some spell to keep out an evil spirit." "Perhaps I am," he answered quietly, and himself fixed the wreath of garlic around her neck. The last words he said to her were, "Take care you do not disturb it, and even if the room feel close, do not tonight open the window or the door." 13th of September. Van Helsing and I returned early in the morning. Mrs. Westenra greeted us warmly and said, "You will be glad to know that Lucy is better. The dear child is still asleep." The Professor smiled. "Ah, my treatment is working." To which he answered, "You must not take all the credit to yourself, Doctor. Lucy's state this morning is due in part to me." "How do you mean, ma'am?" asked the Professor. "Well, I was anxious about the dear child in the night and went into her room. There were a lot of those horrible flowers about, everywhere, and she actually had a bunch of them round her neck. I took them all away and opened the window to let in a little fresh air. You will be pleased with her, I'm sure." As she spoke, I watched the Professor's face and saw it turn ashen grey. The instant she had disappeared, he said, "Come, we must see and act." And together we went up to Lucy's room, where we looked on the poor face with the same awful waxen pallor as before. "As I expected," he murmured. Presently he took an opportunity of telling Mrs. Westenra that she must not remove anything from Lucy's room without consulting him. What does it all mean? I am beginning to wonder if my long habit of life amongst the insane is beginning to tell upon my own brain. Memorandum left by Lucy Westenra. 17th of September, night. I feel I am dying of weakness and have barely strength to write. I went to bed as usual, taking care that the flowers were placed as Dr. Van Helsing directed, and soon fell asleep. I was waked by the flapping at the window, which had begun after that sleepwalking on the cliff at Whitby when Mina saved me, and which now I know so well. I went to the window and looked out, but could see nothing, except a big bat, which had been buffeting its wings against the window, so I went back to bed again. Presently the door opened and Mother looked in. She said, "I was uneasy about you, darling, and came in to see that you were all right." I asked her to come in and sleep with me. As she lay there in my arms and I in hers, the flapping and buffeting came to the window again. After a while there was a low howl out in the shrubbery, and shortly after there was a crash at the window. In the aperture of the broken panes there was the head of a great, gaunt, grey wolf. Mother cried out in fright and struggled up into a sitting posture, and clutched wildly at anything that would help her. Amongst other things, she clutched the wreath of flowers that Dr. Van Helsing insisted on my wearing round my neck, and tore it away from me. For a second or two she sat up, pointing at the wolf, and there was a strange, horrible gurgling in her throat. Then she fell over. The air seems full of specks, floating and circling. What am I to do? I shall hide this paper in my breast, where they shall find it when they come to lay me out. My dear mother gone. It is time that I go too. Dr. Seward's diary, 18th of September. I drove as usual to Hillingham and arrived early. I knocked gently. After a while, finding no response, I knocked and rang again, but more impatiently, and still without response. A terrible fear began to assail me. Was this desolation but another link in the chain of doom which seemed drawing tight around us? I could find no means of ingress. Every window and door was fastened and locked, and I returned baffled to the porch. As I did so, I met Van Helsing coming up the avenue. We went round to the back of the house, where there was a kitchen window. With a knife, we pushed back the fastening on the sashes and opened the window. I helped the professor in and followed him. There was no one in the kitchen. Then we ascended to Lucy's room. With white faces and trembling hands, we opened the door gently and entered the room. How shall I describe what we saw? On the bed lay two women, Lucy and her mother. The latter was covered with a white sheet. By her side lay Lucy. Her face was at its worst, for the open mouth showed the pale gums. In particular, the canine teeth looked longer and sharper than the rest. There came a sort of dull flapping or buffeting at the window. I peeped out. By the corner of the blind, I could see that the noise was made by a great bat which wheeled round, and every now and again struck the window with its wings. There was a sheet of notepaper in her hand. Van Helsing read it, and in silence passed the note to me. When I had read it, I stood looking at the professor, and after a pause asked him, "In God's name, what does it all mean?" Van Helsing put out his hand and took the paper, saying, "Do not trouble about it now. Forget it for the present. You shall know and understand it all in good time, but it will be later." Then he saw Lucy's neck, and I could hear his ejaculation, "Mein Gott!" I bent over and looked too, and some queer chill came over me. The wounds on the throat had absolutely disappeared. Lucy opened her eyes, which were dull and hard, and said, in a soft, voluptuous voice, such as I had never heard from her lips, "John, oh my love, I am so glad you have come. Kiss me." At that instant, Van Helsing swooped upon me, and catching me by the neck with both his hands, dragged me back with a fury of strength which I never thought he could have possessed, and actually hurled me across the room. "Not for your life," he said, "not for your living soul and hers." I was so taken aback that I did not know for a moment what to do or say. I kept my eyes fixed on Lucy, as did Van Helsing, and we saw a spasm as of rage flit like a shadow over her face. The sharp teeth